Money had bent governments, bought railroads, moved markets, and reshaped continents. On April 10, 1912, it also bought the finest suites ever built on a ship. The wealthiest people on Earth boarded the Titanic, believing their fortunes made them untouchable. Private promenades, personal servants, priceless jewelry locked in steel safes, dining rooms, more luxurious than European palaces. And yet, 4 days later, more than half of those fortunes were meaningless. When the ship struck ice, money stopped working. Not because it vanished, but because it no longer mattered. The most advanced technology of the age failed. The strongest social hierarchy ever built failed. And for many of the richest passengers alive, wealth could not buy time, space, or survival. This is not a story about a shipwreck. It is a story about power meeting a limit it could not overcome. In the early 20th century, wealth was not abstract. It was visible, physical, and unquestioned. Fortunes were measured in railroads owned, steel mills controlled, banks influenced, and governments quietly advised. America was in its Gilded Age. Europe was ruled by industrial dynasties, and capitalism was rewriting social order faster than laws could keep up. The Titanic was not just transportation. It was a floating declaration that wealth and engineering had conquered nature. White Star Line marketed it as practically unsinkable, not because it was proven, but because the world wanted to believe it. The richest passengers didn't just accept that belief, they embodied it. John Jacob Astor IV boarded Titanic as the richest man on the ship and one of the richest men on Earth. His fortune, adjusted for inflation, was worth billions today. Real estate, hotels, rail investments, inventions, and military prestige, all wrapped into one name. Astor didn't travel like ordinary passengers. He brought his young pregnant wife Madeline, servants, a personal physician, and luggage containing rare artifacts and valuables. His suite included a private deck promenade, something no other ship had ever offered. This was a man accustomed to bending systems to his will. Markets moved when Astor moved, but markets don't matter when steel meets ice. Astor survived the collision itself. He felt the jolt. He knew something was wrong, and like many powerful men of his era, he assumed order would restore itself. He helped his wife into a lifeboat. He asked a simple question: could he join her, given her condition? The officer said no. Women and children first was not a suggestion. It was law in that moment. Astor stepped back. No amount of wealth could override that command. He was last seen standing calmly as the lifeboats lowered. His body was later recovered, crushed by a falling funnel. His fortune survived. He did not. Benjamin Guggenheim was another titan aboard Titanic. The Guggenheim family's mining empire spanned continents. Copper, silver, and lead flowed through their holdings. Benjamin traveled with his valet and his mistress, dressed in the finest clothes money could buy. When the danger became clear, Guggenheim changed into evening wear. "We've dressed up in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen," he reportedly said. This was not bravado, it was acceptance. In a world built on hierarchy and image, dignity was the last currency left. Guggenheim gave his mistress and servants seats on lifeboats. He stayed behind. Wealth had given him everything except escape. Isidor Straus, owner of Macy's department store, represented another form of power: retail dominance. Macy's wasn't just a store, it was a system that shaped consumption itself. Straus and his wife Ida were among the most respected couples in American society. When offered seats on a lifeboat, Ida refused unless her husband could join her. When he declined, she stayed with him. Witnesses recalled her saying she would not be separated after so many years. They were last seen sitting together on deck chairs as the ship sank. Their wealth had built a retail empire, but it could not break a personal vow. These stories are often told as romance or tragedy, but beneath them lies a harsher truth. The Titanic exposed something the wealthy rarely confront. Systems work until they don't, and when they fail, hierarchy collapses faster than anyone expects. The ship itself was built on financial assumptions. Speed mattered less than luxury because the wealthy paid for comfort, not urgency. Safety regulations were written for older ships, not floating palaces. Lifeboat capacity met legal minimums, not human needs. The law assumed fewer passengers. The business model assumed calm seas and perfect operations. Profit, not resilience, shaped the design. The Titanic's builders believed compartmentalization made the ship safe. Watertight doors could seal off flooding sections. What they didn't account for was scale. Ice didn't puncture one compartment, it sliced across 6. The system failed not because it was poorly designed, but because it was optimized for the wrong risks. This is a pattern that repeats throughout financial history. Systems built for efficiency collapse under stress they were never designed to handle. The richest passengers trusted the system because they always had. Railroads ran on schedule, banks honored withdrawals, governments protected property rights. But the ocean did not care about balance sheets. When the Titanic began to sink, access to lifeboats depended not on wealth, but on location and timing. First-class passengers had better access initially, but confusion erased that advantage quickly. Many boats launched half-empty because officers feared overcrowding. Others left before steerage passengers even understood what was happening. This wasn't a failure of morality alone, it was a failure of incentives. No one wanted to panic. Panic would have damaged the White Star Line's reputation, the captain's career, and the illusion of control. The delay cost lives. Wealth had built the ship, influenced its marketing, and shaped its operation. But it also blinded decision-makers to uncomfortable truths. As the night went on, the value of money dropped to 0. Some passengers reportedly offered bribes for seats on lifeboats. Old checks, diamonds, none of it mattered. A lifeboat could not be bought once it was gone. Time became the only asset, and it was in short supply. This moment reveals something unsettling about wealth. Its power depends entirely on systems agreeing to honor it. Remove the system, and wealth becomes symbolic. The Titanic's sinking wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a shock to the global elite. Newspapers listed the dead by class and net worth. Markets reacted. Insurance companies faced massive claims. Public trust in technological progress cracked. The idea that modern engineering could conquer nature was suddenly in doubt. And quietly, regulation followed. Lifeboat requirements changed. Shipping lanes were monitored. Ice patrols were created. Safety became a priority only after failure, not before. But the deeper lesson went largely unlearned. Over the next century, wealth would continue to concentrate. Systems would grow more complex, and confidence would rise again. Each time, elites would believe their position insulated them from collapse, and each time, reality would disagree. Look at the financial crises of the modern era. In 2008, some of the wealthiest bankers in the world believed risk models protected them. Mortgage-backed securities were rated safe. Leverage was justified by historical data. When the system cracked, those same institutions needed government lifeboats. Wealth didn't disappear, but its vulnerability was exposed. Some individuals lost fortunes overnight. Others were saved not by markets, but by policy decisions. The Titanic shows that wealth often survives collapse better than people do. The states were settled. Trusts continued. Families recovered financially, but survival itself was not guaranteed by net worth. This distinction matters. We often confuse wealth with safety, and safety with control. The Titanic proves they are not the same. There's another uncomfortable layer to this story. Many of the poorest passengers on Titanic never stood a chance. Steerage travelers were physically separated, delayed by locked gates and language barriers. While wealth couldn't guarantee survival, poverty almost guaranteed death. This wasn't random, it was structural. The same economic hierarchy that built luxury suites also limited access to exits for the poor. The system didn't fail equally, it failed predictably. That pattern repeats today. Economic shocks hit the bottom first and hardest. The wealthy lose percentages. The poor lose livelihoods. Titanic's story isn't about equality in disaster. It's about inequality revealing itself under pressure. And yet, the most striking moments come from those who stepped outside pure self-interest. Straus staying with his wife, Guggenheim choosing dignity, Astor accepting a rule that stripped him of privilege. These moments resonate because they challenge the assumption that wealth defines worth. When systems collapse, values are exposed. The Titanic also challenges our modern obsession with optimization. The ship was optimized for luxury, speed, and prestige. Redundancy was minimized to reduce cost and maximize space. Lifeboats cluttered decks and disrupted aesthetics, so they were limited. This is the same logic that drives just-in-time supply chains, high-frequency trading, and hyper-leveraged finance. Efficiency wins until it doesn't. Every era has its Titanic something. declared too big, too advanced, too sophisticated to fail. Something backed by the smartest minds and the deepest pockets. And when it breaks, the shock isn't just economic, it's psychological. Confidence dies faster than capital. Today, wealth is more abstract than ever. It lives in databases, derivatives, and digital assets. But the underlying dependency remains the same. Wealth works because systems work. Banks, laws, electricity, internet trust. Remove enough layers, and the illusion fades. In extreme moments, war, disaster, collapse, money reverts to what it really is, a claim, not a guarantee. The Titanic reminds us that the richest people often live closest to risk without realizing it. Their lives are built on assumptions that have always held, until one night in the North Atlantic proved they didn't. The ship wasn't sunk by arrogance alone. It was sunk by confidence, without contingency. After the disaster, inquiries were held. Blame was assigned carefully. No single villain emerged. That too is telling. Systemic failures rarely have simple villains. They have incentives, blind spots, and collective denial. Everyone involved had reasons for their choices. The outcome didn't care. As we look back, it's tempting to romanticize the wealthy passengers as tragic figures frozen in time. But their story is not unique. It's cyclical. Wealth rises, systems harden, confidence grows, warning signs are ignored, and collapse follows. Then reforms arrive, memory fades, and the cycle begins again. The Titanic sank in under 3 hours. Fortunes that took lifetimes to build became irrelevant in minutes. This doesn't mean wealth is meaningless. It means wealth is conditional. Its power depends on stability, cooperation, and belief. When those disappear, wealth reveals its limits. There are 3 lessons worth taking from this story. First, money is powerful, but it is not protection. It amplifies comfort and influence in stable systems, but it cannot override physical reality or moral rules when systems break. Second, systems optimized for prestige and profit are fragile. Resilience requires redundancy, humility, and preparation for unlikely risks. Third, values outlast assets. In moments of true crisis, decisions are remembered not for how much was owned, but for how people acted when ownership no longer mattered. The Titanic's wealthiest passengers didn't fail because they were rich. They failed because they believed wealth was enough. It never is. The question that remains isn't about the past, it's about the present. Which systems today are we calling unsinkable? Which assumptions feel too solid to question? And when the next collision comes, what will still matter? If this story made you think differently about money, power, and security, take a moment to reflect on how fragile modern certainty really is. And if you want more stories that uncover the hidden limits of wealth and systems we take for granted, stay with this channel. Because history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes, and it always sends the bill.